Your story isn't defined by the worst choices you've made. It's defined by the person you choose to become after them. The Shadow Cat Production. I knew a man who spent years hollowing himself out to fit the shape of his father's expectations. He believed that kindness was a weakness. He became cold, defensive, and pushed away the people who genuinely cared about him. When the reality of what he had built finally set in, he didn't retreat into the comfort of blaming his upbringing. He simply observed the wreckage, accepted his role in it, and began the quiet, often unrewarded work of changing his behaviors. His story taught me a lesson that your past may shape you, but it never has the final say. The person you become is still your choice.
Oh, it's you. I might have known you had a stake in this.
A big stake, one of our most profitable fields of operation, and so easy to manage. I just check up. People do all the work. Yes, people think houses take care of themselves, but they don't. Houses left to themselves go to pieces.
Well, maybe this kind of thing wouldn't happen if people understood the problem.
Wouldn't make the slightest difference.
We disagree. Let's go back to the beginning.
Every day, millions of individuals quietly promise themselves that change in their life is coming. So, they wait. They resolve to wake up earlier, to stop procrastinating, to get rid of destructive habits, or perhaps simply to become kinder and more patient with those around them. The initial momentum feels entirely authentic, yet in most instances, tomorrow subtly transitions into next week. Next week gradually expands into next year. Eventually, many individuals cease making these internal declarations of reform. They stop asserting that they will change and instead begin to articulate a very different conclusion. They start saying, "This is just who I am." This shift in perspective is profound. The problem, therefore, is not whether human beings possess the capacity to change. The actual problem lies in the psychology that causes individuals to eventually conclude that they cannot. Why do people who genuinely desire a different path ultimately resign themselves to a fixed, unchanging nature, even when that nature causes them continued dissatisfaction? At some specific point, the belief in possibility is replaced by a rigid acceptance of inevitability.
If you're what they call a shy guy, that's when you really feel it. The loneliness of being new in town. You don't know how to make people like you, and you find yourself holding a grudge against them. You're standing on the outside looking in. You might have something to contribute to their conversation, but nobody cares whether you do or not. There's a barrier, and you don't know how to begin breaking it down. You imagine they keep watching the way you look, the way you act. They think you're different. So you head for home. What else?
At first glance, the most straightforward explanation for this phenomenon is a simple lack of willpower. The obvious answer is that people do not change because they are inherently lazy. It is an explanation that sounds entirely reasonable and requires very little analytical effort to accept. Society frequently reinforces this narrative. They suggest that failure to achieve personal transformation is merely a character flaw, a deficit of personal discipline. We observe someone returning to a bad habit and immediately categorize their behavior as a failure of effort. However, this assumption fails to account for the immense emotional exhaustion that often accompanies these cycles. When we observe the actual behavioral patterns of individuals attempting to alter their lives, we frequently witness intense bursts of exertion followed by severe depletion. The individuals who relapse into negative behaviors more often are caught in an internal conflict. Perhaps laziness is an incorrect diagnosis altogether. The persistent failure to adopt new behaviors or abandon old ones might not be rooted in a refusal to exert energy, but rather in a misallocation of it. It becomes increasingly apparent that identifying laziness as the primary barrier is a superficial assessment. The resistance to change must be anchored in something far more systemic and fundamental to the human mind. If effort alone was the determining variable, the success rate for personal transformation would be significantly higher. The true cause is likely concealed beneath layers of cognitive conditioning.
But still, you can't forget that you're alone, an outsider.
Hello, Phil. How's everything?
Oh, okay, I guess, Dad.
Is your record transmitter and microphone coming?
Oh, all right, I guess. I know it isn't either. I can't figure out where to connect in the oscillator. I know I have to connect it into the amplifier, but where? It just doesn't fit in.
Why not a store and get more information?
To understand this resistance, it is necessary to examine the means operating beneath conscious awareness. Psychology demonstrates that habits are not merely repeated actions. They are highly efficient algorithms designed to minimize cognitive load, eventually becoming entirely automatic. Neuroscience provides the evidence for this. It shows neural pathways physically strengthened through repetition that turns familiar behaviors into the path of least biological resistance. From an evolutionary standpoint, this design is flawless. Predictability conserves vital energy, while unpredictability and novel behaviors require significant metabolic resources and introduce potential risk. Moving beyond biology, human identity operates on a remarkably similar principle. People possess an intense psychological drive to protect the consistency of their self-concept because uncertainty, even an uncertainty that might lead to positive outcomes, registers to the nervous system as a threat. The individual who has operated as a cynic or a chronic procrastinator understands the rules of that specific existence. Adopting a new, unfamiliar way of being introduces a volatile variable into their established equilibrium. Every available scientific and psychological clue points toward the exact same suspect. The brain is not actively seeking to sabotage success. It is simply executing its primary directive, which is to ensure survival through efficiency. The brain exhibits a relentless, unyielding preference for familiarity over novelty. It prioritizes the known failure over the unknown success.
Well, you might try watching, listening. Pick out the most popular boys and girls in school and keep an eye on them. Try to figure out why people like them. Not that you'll ever be just like any of them, but you might learn something. Well, see you at dinner.
Well, there's an idea. Maybe a good idea. Worth a try, anyway. And tomorrow's not too soon to start.
This leads to a revelation regarding human behavior. The greatest obstacle to profound personal change is not habit, nor is it a lack of environmental resources. The ultimate barrier is identity itself. The process of stagnation accelerates precisely when an individual alters their internal vocabulary. Once someone transitions from describing an action to defining their character, starting to say, "I am lazy," "I am an angry person," "I am selfish," or "I am just not disciplined," a critical threshold is crossed. These statements cease to function as objective observations of past behavior. Instead, they solidify into core identities. They become the fundamental parameters through which the individual navigates reality. The human psyche is designed to align actions with the perceived self. People rarely act in direct contradiction to who they firmly believe they are. If you categorize yourself as a fundamentally flawed or static entity, your subconscious will automatically generate behaviors that prove that hypothesis correct. This is a much deeper and more restrictive insight than the standard assertion that habits are difficult to break. A habit is merely an action you perform. An identity is the framework of who you are. Attempting to change an external habit while maintaining an incompatible internal identity is a mathematical impossibility. The system will always recalibrate to match its programming. It ensures the persistence of the very traits the individual consciously claims they wish to eliminate.
Andy's got something to say, and Jack's listening. He really seems interested. Come to think of it, Jack's always interested in what people are talking about. Maybe that's why he hits it off so well with everybody. Anyhow, Andy thinks he's a great guy. No, that's too easy, just listening. But what's this? Sounds like Jane's caught on to the same thing. She's listening. Hearing about Helen's collection of menus and liking it. That makes her kingpin with Helen. Maybe there is something in this business of being a good listener.
If identity functions as the primary psychological prism, the logical inquiry must shift entirely. The defining question becomes, can identity actually change? It is necessary to examine the empirical evidence rather than relying on theoretical optimism. When we analyze neuroplasticity, it is evident that the brain retains the mechanical capacity to rewire its established frameworks throughout an individual's lifespan. We observe this mechanical shift manifesting in extreme human scenarios. There are documented accounts of individuals completely overcoming decades of severe chemical addiction. Look at soldiers returning from active combat who systematically strip the hypervigilant psychologies required for war. Observe the specific subset of the prison population who, after years of incarceration and criminal identification, completely transform their value systems and reintegrate into society as entirely different functional entities. Look at individuals who face catastrophic financial or professional failure and manage to rebuild their lives without carrying the psychological architecture of a defeated person. Each of these examples serves as concrete evidence, not of temporary behavioral modification, but of fundamental identity replacement. They demonstrate that the core self is not a permanent, unalterable monolith. Even individuals who have spent a lifetime operating under destructive or negative habits possess the latent capacity to overwrite their internal programming. The prison of identity has locks, but the historical data confirms that those locks are entirely mechanical and capable of being bypassed.
You're alone, Bud. Alone in the crowd. But keep looking around. Try to find out what the score is. Look at Jack and Beezy over there. Girls seem to like them. Why? What's the angle? They do act kind of polite. At least they seat the girls and give their orders to the waiter. They aren't loud like some of the guys.
Cherry Coke, chocolate Coke, milkshake, and mallet. Double chocolate mallet. Okay, I got it. Whoa, geez.
Excuse me, please. I've got the orders for my table. Just helping out during rush hour, Bob.
Gee, thanks a lot, Chick. That's swelling.
Okay, Bob. Hey, girls.
There's Chick being helpful again.
I can't quite decide.
Investigating these transformations reveals a hidden operation governing the human psyche. Identity is fundamentally not a fixed, innate characteristic. It is an ongoing process. It is meticulously built and continuously reinforced by specific variables. The selective memories we choose to dwell upon, the automatic habits we perform daily, the social feedback we accept from our environment, and, most critically, the internal narratives we repeat to ourselves. The realization that identity is constructed rather than predetermined alters the equation entirely. If the self is built from these components, it mathematically follows that altering the components will alter the final construct. If the internal stories we recite regarding our past failures can be actively edited and rewritten, then the underlying identity can change. And if the foundational identity can change, then subsequent behavior will naturally align with that new foundation. It is a cascading sequence of cause and effect. The individual who has spent decades acting unethically or failing to achieve their potential is not permanently bound by his history. By deliberately changing the input, introducing new habits, reframing past traumas as distinct events rather than defining characteristics, and consciously rejecting the established narrative of being a bad or unsuccessful person, the output must inevitably shift. The mechanism for transformation is always present and operational, waiting for the individual to consciously assume control of the construction process.
Yeah, sure would be something to take Mary Lou to the mixer. Wonder if she already has a date.
Well, how's the oscillator coming along?
Hi, Dad. Oh, I haven't quite got it working yet. But, you know that other business we were talking about? Well, I've been following your advice.
How about it? Find out anything?
Yeah, Dad, I think I did. It looks like people who get along best with other people are, well, the people who think about the other guy. They make a point of listening to what others have to say and watching for ways to do things for them, being polite toward them. Do you suppose it's sort of a case of thinking so much about other people that you don't have much time to yourself?
Well, perhaps that's right. Maybe the best way to find out is to try it next chance you get.
When observing this process systematically, the conventional definitions of personal transformation begin to seem imprecise. We frequently conceptualize change as the total annihilation of the former self and the artificial adoption of an entirely new persona. This model is inefficient and psychologically unsustainable. Perhaps genuine change does not require becoming someone else at all. Perhaps the process is far more reductive than additive. It seems highly probable that true transformation is simply the act of unearthing the potential that was obscured by years of accumulated trauma, negative reinforcement, and poor decision-making. It is the process of becoming the person you quietly stopped believing you had the capacity to be. The individual who shifts from a destructive path to an ethical one, or the person who transitions from chronic failure to sustained success, has not magically imported a foreign personality. They have systematically stripped the false identities and limiting narratives that previously dictated their actions. They have recognized that their past behavior, no matter how regrettable or prolonged, was a symptom of an earlier biological and psychological configuration, not a permanent life sentence. Recognizing this distinction is vital. It shifts the objective from an exhausting pursuit of an impossible ideal to a deliberate recalibration of the self. The choice to act honorably or to pursue success with discipline is available in every given moment, regardless of the choices made in the preceding moments.
You needn't worry about doing anything wrong, Phil. You act all right. Just do and say whatever seems most natural.
Well, Dad, maybe it will be easier after I've had a chance to talk to her at the mixer. You know what? I kind of think this is going to fit in after all. Well, this is it. Sink or swim. Oh, there's Mary Lou. She did come with another guy. Beezy Barnes. What now?
We routinely conceptualize life as a continuous, unidirectional trajectory operating under the assumption that every significant error or period of dysfunction permanently dictates the final destination. Society often reinforces the notion that a flawed history is an inescapable determinant of future potential. However, an objective analysis of human history and individual psychology tells a definitively different story. Every life, upon close inspection, is fundamentally a series of ongoing revisions. Every established habit was, at some point in time, an entirely unfamiliar action. Every display of virtue or discipline was once practiced for the very first time by someone who had previously lacked it. The reality is that every individual you might admire or consider successful has lived through obsolete, flawed versions of themselves that they deliberately chose to leave behind. A dark past or a history of failure does not void the capacity for future excellence. It merely serves as the preliminary data set from which the individual can learn to calibrate correctly. Perhaps the fundamental question was never whether human beings possess the mechanical ability to change their lives. The evidence overwhelmingly confirms that they do. Perhaps the only relevant question that remains is whether we are finally willing to stop confusing our historical data with our ultimate identity.
They are interested in that shy guy. They know he's alive now. And, strangely enough, he's just discovered that they're alive. Of course they'd like to see the record player. Of course they'll come over. Tomorrow afternoon.
I just have to do a little more soldering and connect the oscillator into the amplifier and everything will fit in.
Oh, Phil, could you have it ready by next week and bring it over to my house?
I guess so.
Some of the gang's coming over Thursday night, and we could have a lot of fun with it. You will come, won't you?
Well, one shy guy is on his way. Not that his worries are over. He'll still have his moments of doubt, of hesitation, of fear that he might do something wrong. But he can face these problems now because he knows that he's not really different. And while he's discovered only a few of many ways to overcome shyness, he's discovered that it can be done. And that's the main thing, isn't it?